Welcome back to my YouTube channel. My mom is inviting you to dinner today. Read my fiancé's message. It was the night before our wedding. I smiled at the thought of meeting my soon-to-be family one last time before everything changed. I chose a soft cream dress, one that made me feel both gentle and strong. Still, my heart carried a quiet storm, the kind every woman feels before walking into a room that will decide something about her future. When I arrived, the table was set beautifully, candles flickering like tiny promises, pasta steaming in wide bowls, and the scent of rosemary and olive oil hanging in the air. His mother, elegant in her pearls, greeted me with the kind of politeness that feels just slightly too polished. She kissed both my cheeks and said, "Benvenuta." Welcome. Throughout dinner, she asked questions about my family, my job, my upbringing. They weren't unkind, but they were sharp. Every answer felt like a test. My fiancé laughed easily, trying to keep the atmosphere light. But I could feel something unspoken passing between them, a kind of quiet appraisal. Then, as the plates were cleared and the evening came to a close, his mother leaned toward him and said something in Italian. He laughed. They both did. She didn't know that I had studied the language for years while working abroad, that I understood every word. "She's pretty," she said. "But let's see how long the charm lasts." It wasn't cruel, just dismissive, the kind of comment meant to put a woman in her place without ever raising her voice. I smiled, not because it didn't sting, but because it no longer surprised me. Women are tested quietly all the time, in boardrooms, in families, even in love. As I rose to leave, I took her hand gently in mine. Her skin was cool, her eyes curious. And I said softly, in perfect Italian, "Charm fades, but respect lasts forever. I'll make sure we both have plenty of that." Her face froze, not in offense, but in shock. Then slowly she smiled. Not the polite one from earlier, but a real one, the kind that carries acknowledgement. My fiancé looked between us, utterly lost. We left hand in hand, his mother watching from the doorway, that same flicker of candlelight now dancing in her eyes. That night, as I looked at my reflection, I didn't see a woman trying to prove herself. I saw someone who already knew her worth, someone who could hold her own no matter the language. "My mom is inviting you to dinner today," read my fiancé's message. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, the words glowing softly against the dim light of my room. It was a simple sentence, but it carried a weight I couldn't quite name. A day before our wedding, when everything was supposed to be calm, beautiful, and certain, I was being invited to dinner with the family I was about to become a part of forever. I felt my heartbeat quicken, not from fear, but from that mix of anticipation and nerves that always comes before something important. I reread the message, smiling faintly. It was thoughtful of her, I told myself. Maybe she wanted to welcome me. Maybe she wanted to bond before the big day. Still, a quiet part of me wondered what kind of welcome it would truly be. I had met her a few times before. Polite encounters, brief smiles, small talk that never stretched too far. She had always been poised, elegant, and a little distant, the kind of woman who notices everything but says very little. I opened my closet and stared at the dresses lined up like unspoken choices. What do you wear when you're meeting your future mother-in-law one day before your wedding? Something that says I belong, but also I am my own person. I finally chose a soft cream dress, the one that floated gently when I moved. Simple, graceful, but confident. I kept my makeup light, my hair down in loose curls. I wanted to look like myself, just a little more polished. As I got ready, I thought about how far I'd come to reach this point. The months of planning, the long evenings of choosing venues and colors and music, the dreams I'd built around tomorrow. And now, here was one last dinner, a quiet prelude before the vows and promises. A moment where, perhaps, I could truly feel like part of his world. When I finally stepped outside, the evening air was cool, carrying the scent of rain and jasmine. I took a deep breath, feeling a strange calm settle over me. The streetlights glowed softly, and my reflection in the car window looked both nervous and sure. My phone buzzed again. His message popped up with a heart emoji and the words, "She's excited to see you." I smiled, clutching my purse a little tighter. Excited. Maybe she really was. Maybe tonight would be the bridge between two families, two worlds. Or maybe it would be something else entirely. A test, a conversation that would reveal who we truly were before stepping into forever. Either way, I was ready to meet whatever waited for me behind that dinner table. When I arrived at their home, the golden light spilling from the windows made everything look warm and inviting. The house smelled of herbs and roasted garlic, the kind of scent that feels like comfort wrapped in tradition. His mother opened the door with her usual elegance, straight posture, soft smile, pearls glinting at her neck. She greeted me with a polite, practiced grace, the kind that didn't quite touch her eyes. Still, I returned the warmth, stepping inside with a small gift in hand, a bouquet of white lilies. She accepted them with a faint nod, thanking me in that delicate tone that managed to sound both kind and distant at once. The dining room was beautiful, every detail meticulous. The table was set with fine china, polished silverware, and candles that flickered like tiny stars caught in glass. My fiancé came forward to hug me, his presence easing some of the tightness in my chest. He whispered, "You look perfect," before pulling out my chair. Across the table, his mother watched, not disapprovingly, but with the kind of gaze that measures rather than admires. Dinner began with conversation. Light, careful, and filled with questions that seemed harmless but landed sharply. She asked about my family, where I grew up, what my parents did. Her voice was smooth, but her eyes studied every word I said. I answered honestly, keeping my smile steady, trying not to let the quiet weight of her curiosity unsettle me. My fiancé, ever the peacemaker, tried to fill the spaces between us with easy laughter and small stories. But the tension was subtle and constant, like a string pulled just tight enough to hum. The meal itself was divine: homemade pasta, roasted vegetables, wine poured from a bottle that looked older than either of us. I complimented her cooking, and for a brief moment, her expression softened, pride flickering through the restraint. But then she asked how I planned to balance my busy career with marriage. Her tone dipped in casual innocence that wasn't quite innocent at all. I smiled politely, aware of the quiet challenge behind her words. "Balance comes naturally," I said, "especially when both people respect each other's dreams." My fiancé reached for my hand under the table, his thumb tracing small circles, silently proud of how calmly I answered. His mother nodded, lips curving in a subtle, unreadable smile. There were moments of laughter too, shared stories, small jokes, the rhythm of conversation rising and falling like waves. But beneath it all, I felt something else, an invisible layer of observation. She wasn't unkind. She was cautious, like someone deciding whether I was good enough to hold a piece of her son's world. I didn't resent it. In her place, maybe I would have been just as protective. By the time dessert arrived, I found myself studying her too. The way her hands moved gracefully as she served coffee, the way she looked at her son when he laughed, a mix of love and control. It made me wonder if this dinner wasn't about testing me, but about letting me see her as she truly was, not just a mother, but a woman who had spent her whole life building walls of perfection around her family. And as I sat there, smiling, sipping coffee from a porcelain cup that trembled ever so slightly in my hand, I realized this wasn't just a dinner. It was a silent conversation between two women, each measuring the other, both knowing that tomorrow, everything would change. When the plates were finally cleared and only the faint aroma of espresso lingered in the air, the conversation slowed to a gentle drift. My fiancé leaned back in his chair, laughing at something his mother said about his childhood, a story about how he used to sneak cookies before dinner. I smiled, watching the warmth between them, that easy familiarity that only years of shared moments could build. It was sweet, really, but beneath that warmth, I could still sense something else. A quiet undercurrent, something unspoken that had been threading through the evening from the very start. His mother spoke elegantly, her Italian accent wrapping around her words like silk. I listened closely, every tone, every inflection, picking up on the emotions tucked between the syllables. She had a way of speaking that commanded attention, refined, calm, but always in control. And though she had been gracious all evening, there were tiny moments when her eyes softened toward her son and sharpened when they turned to me. As the clock ticked past 9, she turned to him, her lips curving into a small, knowing smile. Her hand brushed his arm as she leaned in slightly, saying something in Italian, her voice low and affectionate. He chuckled instantly, the kind of laugh that sounded familiar, almost instinctive. They shared a look, one of those quiet, family glances that exclude everyone else at the table. But what she didn't know was that I understood every word. I had lived in Rome for nearly a year during college, working part-time at a small cafe where the owner, an old woman named Signora Rossi, taught me Italian with more love than grammar. I remembered those nights vividly, sitting behind the counter, repeating phrases over espresso foam, laughing at my mistakes until the language became a melody I could finally sing without effort. It was one of my proudest achievements, a part of me I rarely spoke about. So when my future mother-in-law said, "È carina, ma vediamo quanto dura il suo incanto," "She's pretty, but let's see how long her charm lasts," I caught every syllable. For a heartbeat, I froze. It wasn't cruel, not entirely, just dismissive, the kind of comment meant to sound light but meant to sting. My fiancé had no idea. He just smiled, oblivious, sipping his wine. I took a quiet breath and forced my lips into a faint smile, steady and calm. I didn't flinch, didn't let a hint of understanding show on my face. Inside, I felt that small spark, the one every woman recognizes when she's underestimated. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. That moment when you realize exactly what people think of you and decide with perfect calmness how to prove them wrong. As I looked at her across the table, I felt a strange kind of peace. This was her way of protecting what she loved, testing who would join her family. Maybe she saw me as fragile or temporary. But what she didn't see was that I'd spent my life holding my own, in rooms colder than this, in conversations far sharper. I didn't need to win her approval tonight. I just needed to let her see, in time, who I truly was. So I stayed quiet, let the laughter fade, and met her gaze with a polite, composed smile, one that said more than words ever could. Because sometimes silence, when chosen carefully, speaks in volumes that no language barrier can hide. After that moment, the evening unfolded in a kind of quiet stillness, like the air before a storm. The laughter had softened into small, polite exchanges, and the clinking of glasses became the only sound filling the pauses between words. My fiancé didn't notice the subtle shift, but I felt it, the awareness that something had changed, that beneath my calm smile, a decision had already taken root. I had no intention of confronting her in anger or embarrassment. That wasn't who I was. I had learned long ago that grace carries more power than pride ever could. I watched her as she talked, her gestures elegant, her posture perfect, every movement deliberate. There was something almost admirable about her precision, the way she managed to control the atmosphere of a room without ever raising her voice. I could see why people respected her, even feared disappointing her. She had built her entire world on discipline and composure, and I sensed that to her, I was still an unknown, someone too new, too unpredictable. But what she didn't realize was that I understood her far more than she knew. I'd grown up watching my own mother fight for her place in a family that didn't welcome her at first. I'd seen her turn judgment into respect through quiet resilience, through actions that spoke louder than confrontation. And maybe, in that moment, I understood my future mother-in-law better than my fiancé ever could. We were two women standing on opposite sides of the same truth, both shaped by pride, both unwilling to bend first. The room felt warmer now, the candles burning low, the faint scent of wine and sugar hanging in the air. My fiancé excused himself to take a call, leaving just the two of us sitting across from each other. The silence stretched, not uncomfortable but charged. She took a slow sip of coffee, her eyes meeting mine, curious but guarded. For the first time all evening, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her gaze, as if she sensed that I had understood more than she intended to share. I thought of all the times women are underestimated, smiled at, tested, quietly measured. It used to bother me, that need to prove myself to people who had already decided what they wanted to believe. But not anymore. Tonight I didn't need to prove anything. I just needed to show that I belonged here, not by permission, but by presence. So I sat straighter, folded my hands gently in my lap, and smiled. Not the polite smile from earlier, but a real one. One that said, "I see you. I understand you. And I'm not afraid of you?" Her lips twitched, almost as if she recognized that smile for what it was, a quiet declaration of strength. There was no hostility in her eyes now, just curiosity. The kind that comes when you realize someone is not as simple as you thought. I could have said something then, revealed that I understood her earlier comment, but I didn't. Timing matters, and I knew this wasn't the right moment. Sometimes the most powerful words are the ones you hold back until they matter most. So I waited. I let the silence stretch a little longer, sipping my coffee as calmly as if nothing had happened. When my fiancé returned, everything seemed normal again. But I knew that before the night ended, I would find the right moment, one that would change the tone of our relationship forever. And when it came, I'd be ready, not with anger or pride, but with the same quiet confidence that had carried me this far. As we stood to leave, the night air greeted us like a soft sigh. The candles on the table had melted down to shimmering pools of wax, and the house glowed in the golden light that only comes after a long evening. My fiancé gathered our things, humming a tune under his breath, still completely unaware of the undercurrent that had passed between his mother and me. I slipped my shawl over my shoulders, my mind calm, steady. The kind of calm that comes not from pretending, but from knowing exactly what you're about to do. His mother followed us to the door, her heels clicking lightly on the tiled floor. She looked composed as ever, lips painted a deep rose, her perfume lingering like a memory of something dignified and distant. For a brief moment, I saw her not as an adversary, but as a woman who had loved deeply, protected fiercely, and built a fortress of perfection around everything she cared for. Maybe in her own way, she had been testing whether I was strong enough to step inside that fortress without breaking it. As my fiancé reached for his jacket, I turned to her. She offered her hand with that same graceful restraint. A handshake meant to end the evening politely, nothing more. But instead of just shaking it, I held her hand a little longer, letting my fingers rest lightly against hers. Her eyes lifted to meet mine, puzzled for just a second. I smiled, steady and warm, the kind of smile that carries both softness and certainty. And then I said, in clear, fluent Italian, my voice calm but unmistakably firm, Il fascino svanisce, ma il rispetto dura per sempre. Mi assicurerò che ne avremo entrambi abbastanza. Charm fades, but respect lasts forever. I'll make sure we both have plenty of that. For a heartbeat, time stopped. Her expression froze, not out of offense, but out of pure, startled disbelief. I watched the realization spread across her face, the understanding that I had heard her earlier, that I had understood everything, and that I had chosen this moment not to humiliate her, but to meet her on her level. The silence between us turned heavy, meaningful, until it softened into something new. Acknowledgement. Her lips parted slightly, then curved into a small, genuine smile. Not polite this time. Not practiced. It was real, quiet, maybe even proud. She gave my hand a gentle squeeze before letting go, her eyes softer than they'd been all evening. My fiancé turned just in time to see that small exchange, confusion flickering across his face. Everything okay? He asked, glancing between us. I nodded, slipping my arm through his. Perfect, I said, and for the first time that night, I truly meant it. As we stepped out into the cool night, I looked back once more. She stood at the doorway, watching us go, her expression unreadable but no longer distant. There was something like respect in her gaze, the kind that isn't given easily, the kind that has to be earned quietly. The street was calm, the city lights reflecting on the wet pavement from a brief drizzle. I walked beside the man I loved, feeling lighter than I had all day. It wasn't about victory, it never was. It was about being seen, about standing firm in who I was without losing my grace. And as the night breeze brushed against my skin, I realized something simple but powerful. Sometimes, strength doesn't roar. Sometimes it speaks softly, in a language someone never expected you to understand. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains, soft and golden, wrapping everything in the quiet promise of a new beginning. My wedding dress hung near the window, delicate and glowing, like it was waiting for me to step into the life I had spent years building toward. But for the first time, I didn't just feel like a bride. I felt like a woman who had finally claimed her space, her voice, her calm power. The dinner had been more than an introduction. It was a moment of truth. Two women from different worlds had met across a table, tested each other, and walked away with a silent understanding. Respect. That was the bridge we built, not with loud words or defiance, but with quiet strength and clarity. When I walked down the aisle later that day, I caught sight of her in the front row. She wasn't smiling the polite, guarded smile from before. This time it was warm, proud even, the kind of smile that said, "I see you now." And in that brief glance, everything that needed to be said passed between us. No words, just recognition. Because in the end, life isn't about proving yourself to others. It's about knowing your worth so deeply that you no longer need to. Sometimes, all it takes is one calm, fearless moment, one soft sentence spoken with grace, to change the way someone sees you forever. And as the music swelled and I took my fiancé's hand, I knew with absolute certainty that I hadn't just married into a family. I had earned my place in it, not through charm, but through quiet, unwavering respect.